Chapter 26 Powder and Dust. As Aiden and Arliss moved westward along the edge of another underground pool, the smell of the thunder tubes grew stronger. They hadn't gone far when Aiden saw up ahead a patch of gray hovering high in the middle distance. Arliss saw it too, and as they moved closer, they glimpsed a twinkle of light and realized they were seeing a sliver of the night sky. "We made it through!" Arliss gasped. "We've made it through!" "Shh!" hissed Aiden. He was as eager as Arliss, but that glimpse of sky reminded him that they were very close to the world where Perthyn stalked, and he had no desire to attract their attention. They crept closer to the entrance, through a narrow neck that opened into a small chamber. The floor of the chamber sloped up to a jagged hole about 6 feet across, and they opened up to the starlit heavens. Aiden and Arliss stood gazing at the sky. It had only been a few hours since they had last seen it, but in the short span there had been many moments when they had doubted they would ever see the sky again. "What next?" whispered Aiden. Arliss was a few feet away, just out of the torchlight, looking at something that Aiden couldn't make out in the darkness. "Psst!" whispered Arliss. "Bring the torch." When Aiden got closer with the torch, he saw what Arliss was looking at. Dozens of barrels stacked against the cave wall. "So the Perthens are using the cave as a storeroom," whispered Aiden. "Just like Harlan's family did. Good place for it, I guess. Nice and cool. What are these? Ale barrels?" "That's not ale we're smelling," Arliss remarked. He pointed at the ground near one of the barrels, where a black spot stood in stark contrast to the white clay. "What do you suppose that is?" Aiden swung the torch in the direction of the spot where Arliss pointed. As he did, a bit of torch pitch popped and sent a shower of orange sparks in all directions. Kapop! The little black soot on the ground exploded in a blaze of white light that blinded Aiden and Arliss and threw up a plume of white smoke that enveloped them in the sweet, acrid smell they knew from the Perthens' thunder tubes. Aiden's ears rang. He could see nothing but bright spots of color swirling in front of him. When the thud of heavy boots echoed in the cave entrance, Aiden barely had the presence of mind to react. He snatched off his helmet and put it over the torch to kill the flame. Then he grabbed Arliss, who hadn't moved since the fire flash, and pulled him behind a barrel. A Perthen soldier, fully uniformed and armed, burst through the cave entrance, bearing a flaming torch. "Who's there?" he growled, scanning the chamber. But his eyes weren't adjusted to the profound darkness, and he didn't see the two Cornwalders, who peered at him from behind the barrel. The torch-bearer was followed almost immediately by a second soldier, who pulled off his own helmet and killed the torch flame, just as Aiden had his own. "Hey," began the first soldier. "What's the big idiot?" snapped the second soldier, cutting him short. "You know not to come in here with a flame." "But I heard a pop, and I smelled smoke, and if you touch off that flame powder, we'll hear a pop like the world has never heard before." He pointed at the barrels stacked along the wall. "That's enough flame powder for enough cannon shots to conquer this pitiful little country 10 times over. One little spark is enough to set the whole thing off." "I just thought," began the first soldier. He was shaking now, terrified at the thought of what his carelessness might have led to. "We've been guarding this cave entrance all night," said the second soldier. "There's nobody in here." He pointed out the cave entrance. "Look, it's getting light out. Our watch is over. It'll be less than an hour before the campfires begins again. Let's try to get some rest." The Perthens heaved themselves out of the cave, leaving Aiden and Arliss in the darkness. "Flame powder," whispered Arliss. "What's flame powder?" "It must be what makes the thunder tubes boom," answered Aiden. He looked in awe at the stacked barrels. "And that's tons of it." Arliss thought back to the little explosion that had so stunned them minutes before. How much flame powder made that flash a minute ago? It would fit into the palm of your hand, said Aiden. Then that's enough flame powder, too. Arliss shivered to think about what that much powder could do. Aiden finished his sentence. Enough to put an end to Cornwald. The boy sat glumly in the dim light that made its way from the brightening sky outside. A strange light was visible in Aiden's eyes. Even in the dimness of the cave, he reached into his pack and pulled out the tinder box. It's also enough to put an end to an invading army. Before Arliss knew what was happening, he heard the ch, 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 ch of Aiden madly striking flint on the steel. Sparks were flying at the dried tinder. Hold on there, big boy, whispered Arliss as he snatched up the tinder. Let's think on this a minute. I ain't opposed to blowing up the persons. But if we can do without blowing up our own selves, I'd rather do that way. What do you suggest, then? Asked Aiden, his eyes still flashing. You're a farm boy, right? Asked Arliss. Yes, answered Aiden. What about it? You ever do a straight burn? Sure, every winter. I saw a farmer near Greasy Cave do it once. He made a narrow little line of fire, go straight from one end of the field to the other. I never knew how he did it. It's not too hard, said Aiden. You just pour a line of turpentine where you want fire to go, put a flame to it, and there it goes. I was just wondering, could we do a straight burn that runs from back there somewhere? Others pointed in the direction they had come from. Maybe that little pool, to these barrels. We'll pour a line of flame powder instead of turpentine, put fire to it at the far end and be a long way off when those barrels boom. Aiden grinned and pounded Arliss on the back. Arliss, you're a genius! Arliss tapped his helmet. I know, said Aiden. It's the miner's head. Our best bet is to get into the pool if we can, remarked Arliss. I don't know what kind of fire we're about to let loose, but I doubt even flame powder can burn water. Good plan, agreed Aiden. The Perthen guard said they'd be firing in an hour. We better move fast. Enough daylight found its way in for the boys to work. The seal was broken on one of the barrels, and they managed to tip it over. The powder fuse would lead there. Using their helmets for scoops, they poured a thick rope of powder along the cave floor as far as the squeeze that served as the cavern's back door. The task got much harder once they were into the next chamber, for the sunlight didn't reach there. They couldn't safely light their torch, so they felt their way in the dark. They were only a few steps beyond the squeeze when they heard a faint boom from outside, followed by another and another. The thunder tubes, said Aiden in a hoarse whisper. They're firing again. He thought of the terror of his countrymen, the helplessness they felt against such weapons. If they're firing those thunder tubes, observed Arliss, it won't be long before somebody comes down here for more powder. We're out of time, Aiden. We gotta touch this thing off. You're right, answered Aiden. But let's be smart about it. How much powder is left in your helmet? 2 or 3 heavy handfuls, I'd say. Mine's almost half full. We've got to empty these helmets. But we can't just dump them out. It has to be a nice, even line, like we've been making. Boom, boom, boom. Aiden, shouted Arliss. We gotta light this thing. We got no more time. Boom, boom. All right, agreed Aiden. He put the tinderbox and a wood splinter in Arliss's hand. He stepped off 10 or 12 strides and light this splinter. Hand me your helmet. I'll finish the powder line where you're making fire. Boom! Boom! Aiden bent to his work, trying to ignore the booming of the thunder tubes. This was a crucial part of the task. At the other end, the powder line was thick and rope-like. Big fire was good as the fuse approached the powder barrels. But at this end, they needed a controlled fire. They wanted to blow up the barrels without blowing themselves up. In near total darkness, with the booming of thunder tubes overhead and the threat of Perthens uncovering their plot Any second, it was hard for Aiden to create the narrow, even powder lines he needed. Boom! 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 Chick! 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 Arliss was striking away with the flint. Chick! 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 Aiden could feel the nervous sweat dripping down the slope of his nose. He had emptied Arliss's helmet, but there was still a couple handfuls of powder left in his own. Boom! 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 Tick! 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 Then, from the entry chamber, he heard the shuffle of boots and a murmur of voices. Hurry! He whispered at Arliss. Chick! 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 The tender wouldn't catch. From the next chamber came a Perthan voice. Oi, Framerge! What's this? What's what? Asked another Perthan. This line of flame powder. Aiden could hear the soldiers' footsteps coming toward them as they followed the powder line. Boom! 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 Chick! 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 Aiden trailed out the last of the powder from his helmet. Arliss! He whispered. Forget the tinder. Bring the flint. Arliss squatted beside him, flint in hand. It suddenly grew completely dark in the chamber. The few rays of light coming in through the rock squeeze were blocked by the form of a soldier trying to squeeze through. Fly, Perthan! Called Aiden. Fly! We're lighting the flame powder. Get out! The soldier stopped, but he didn't run away. Boom! 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 Get him! Came the panicked voice of other Perthan. Stop him! Aiden Arliss could hear the soldiers grunting as he tried to push through the narrow space. He had his chance, Aiden whispered to Arliss. Chick! 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 The intermittent flash of flint sparks gave Arliss enough light to find the end of the powder trail. Chick! The powder caught and hissed to life. By the white flash, they saw the terror-stricken faces of the Perthan soldier, who turned and fled from the sparkling fire that came racing toward him. Aiden scooped up the two helmets and stuck one on his own head and the other on Arliss's. Still seeing spots, the boy stumbled toward the safety of the pool. They were no sooner in the water than the cave shook with the force of an earthquake. The cavern grew bright, lit by a fire that shot through the squeeze. The boys pressed themselves against the pool's rock wall, terrified by what they had unleashed. A hail of rocks, some quite large, rocketed over their heads, propelling by an explosion that rumbled on for half a minute as one barrel of powder touched off the barrels next to it in a chain of explosions that grew stronger and stronger before finally settling down. Even after the explosion stopped, huge chunks of stone continued to fall, thudding to the cave floor and rocking the pool into high waves that tossed Aiden and Arliss around like chips of driftwood in a stormy sea, and finally threw them out of the water and onto the pool's rocky bank. Bruised and terribly sore, Aiden lay on the jagged stone, spluttering and coughing in the darkness. The air was so thick with dust that it was hardly more breathable than the water he had just escaped. A few feet away, Arliss was hacking and spitting. In a brief pause between coughing fits, Aiden heard Arliss's voice, muffled but urgent. Breathe through your tunic! Pardon? Aiden's mouth and throat were so gummy with inhaled cave dust that he could hardly speak the word. Pull your tunic over your mouth and nose and breathe through it. Arliss was interrupted by another violent coughing fit. Or this dust will choke you. Aiden did as Arliss instructed. The tunic mask filtered out just enough dust for Aiden to get his breath. But both boys continued hacking and coughing so hard that they could hardly carry on conversation. Can you walk? Called Aiden into the darkness. I think so, answered Arliss, grunting a little as he picked himself up. Can you? Aiden struggled to his feet. Everything hurts, but nothing seems to be broken. I think so. Their one exit was blocked. A single spot of light illuminated the suspended cave dust where the rock squeeze used to lead to the entry chamber. We're buried, observed Arliss. We can't dig our way out. We aren't getting out. On hands and knees, Aiden and Arliss crawled painfully over loose jagged rock toward the little slit of light, their only hope of ever seeing the sky again. Arliss pulled a chunk of limestone out of the rubble pile that blocked the cave neck, and the tiny ray became a small shaft of light no thicker than a finger. Aiden's eyes were filled with tears of gratitude as he looked along the ray that shot past him into the cave's deeper darkness. He caught the streaming light in his hand as if it were a stream of water. Never had he been so happy to see a shaft of light and floating dust. Forgetting about the pains in his arms, his legs, his back, his side, his neck, and his head, Aiden attacked the rubble pile. He wanted more light. He had to see more light. Whoa! Shouted Arliss. Careful now. But it was too late. The first rock Aiden pulled out caused a collapse and a little landslide that blocked out what little light they had. They found themselves in darkness again. Why don't you let me do this? Suggested Arliss. Aiden watched intently for another sliver of light as Arliss worked methodically at the rubble pile. Soon a new ray of light appeared, then another as Arliss cleared stone and pebbles away. Before long, Arliss had opened a tiny passage through the rubble, and on their bellies the boys squeezed through to the entry chamber, or what used to be the entry chamber. It was now an enormous crater. Its roof had been blown off by the exploding fire powder and was open to the morning sky.